How much was Pope Francis really worth in worldly terms? It's a tricky thing to assess, but taking a look at the multi-billion-dollar institution that sustained him until the end paints a picture of how he was living, and how his lifestyle compared to those of previous popes. At just over 100 acres, or about an eighth of the size of Central Park, Vatican City is the smallest country in the world. It has everything: a mint that prints its currency, its own postal system, it even issues its own passports. The city-state's population is made up of Swiss guards and several members of the Catholic clergy, as well as the members of the Sacred College of Cardinals, who are the Pope's counselors and are considered to be princes of the Church. But despite the tiny population, it sits on a vast collection of priceless real estate and art. The Papal Palace is more than 4 centuries old, as is the Holy House of Loreto. Then there are the Vatican Museums, which includes the Sistine Chapel. If you want to try and put a dollar value on all that, however, good luck, because when the Vatican released its first ever financial statement listing its net assets as 4 billion euros, it didn't include the Vatican Bank or the Vatican Museums. When Jorge Mario Bergoglio, aka Pope Francis, was elected Pope by the College of Cardinals back in 2013, he became the Vatican's absolute monarch. However, unlike other monarchs like Britain's King Charles III, the Pope owned none of the properties under his care. On Easter Monday 2025, Pope Francis died at the age of 88. From the Vatican, Cardinal Kevin Farrell told the world of the Pope's humility, which was reflected in his journey to the highest position in the Catholic Church. Francis entered the priesthood in the 1950s as a member of the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, an order of Catholic priests who have lived under a stated vow of poverty for nearly 2 centuries. This means that when he joined the Jesuits, then Friar Bergoglio had to give up everything he owned to live on a budget dictated by his superior. As fellow Jesuit priest and America magazine editor James Martin wrote for CNN, Bergoglio had to give his community anything he earned, plus any gifts. He even had to ask for cash for larger purchases, such as a suit. When he finally became a cardinal, he chose not to live like one.
He rejected living in an ornate mansion, choosing a modest one-room apartment instead, taking public transport and cooking his own meals.
Francis's austere nature was visible in his style of dress. By contrast, Pope Benedict loved his red loafers, ermine cloaks, and Mercedes Popemobile with leather seats and gold trim. Until his death, Pope Francis preferred his all-white cassock and traveled around in a Fiat or a Ford Focus. As one of the world's most powerful figures, it is easy to assume Pope Francis would at least surrender somewhat to the ostentatious wonders of his papacy. The Vatican did pay for all his various expenses, including the cost of travel and living, but Francis declined his salary, which would have been roughly $385,000 per year. This figure, plus the vehicles, housing, and clothing provided to Francis, leads outlets like the Daily Mirror to guess that he was worth roughly $16 million. But take that number with a grain of salt, as Francis reportedly downgraded from the centuries-old traditional comforts of papal living. Just one example. According to a 2013 report from the BBC, around the time Francis was anointed as the Pope, the Catholic leader decided to leave the top floor of the Vatican's Apostolic Palace, the usual living quarters of the Pope. Instead, he chose to reside in the Cardinal's Domus Santa Marta residence, fortifying his beloved, humble reputation.